I thought it might be fun for us to start before we kind of get into the recipe itself. Might be fun for us to kind of talk about what our favorite things to cook and eat are. Um, Personally, I love simple food. And I think my favorite thing since I was a kid till now and will ever forever be is roast chicken. Love roast chicken. I could eat it all the time, and I do. So that is my favorite dish to cook and eat. Kind of the first cooking class that we're doing with the Spark, we're talking a lot about kind of simple one pot cooking um, because we're all in the middle of a pandemic. Access to food, access to restaurants, all of those things have changed. And I think a lot more people are cooking at home and also trying to balance the duality of working from home and also trying to cook. So one nice thing about being a chef is you are hopefully well trained at using everything as much as possible to save money. So I think that has been helpful for my family to not maybe reduce the amount of trips we have to go to the store and really trying to think a little bit outside the box as to what you can and can use in your food. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that today. It's a very simple, basic recipe using a one pot cooking idea. It's not actually going to be in a pot. We're going to be cooking it in something called empapillote, which is in paper, and it's traditionally a French preparation where you take parchment paper, usually fish, and you kind of fold it up and then you bake it. All of the ingredients that are in there release liquid, and that liquid steams and then basically causes it to puff up. We're going to be using heavy duty aluminum foil for the same purpose. The nice thing about this is you don't have to clean the pot. You can just kind of clean the foil and then recycle it. And it's also very versatile. This is a basic recipe using, we're going to be using leeks, turnip, fennel, carrots as kind of our base veg. We also have some kale here. There's going to be some spinach in the dumpling, but you really can use anything. You can use rutabaga versus turnip. You can use celery root. You can add in some beets. I'm really trying to find vegetables that cook within about 45 to 50 minutes. So if you're going to do beets, maybe cut them a little bit smaller. But the veg that we're using now will cook perfectly in that amount of time so that the dumpling itself will steam and the chicken will be nice and tender. So I don't know about everyone else, but I always have lots of chicken in the house, especially boneless, skinless chicken thighs. I like chicken breasts, but I like the fattiness that comes along with the chicken thigh. So that's kind of where I'm going with this recipe. And I always have leftover bread. We always have leftover bread. I think everyone has leftover bread. So we're going to be making a bread dumpling. And the nice thing about putting this bread dumpling in this empapillote package is it kind of becomes a sponge. So as all of this liquid is coming off of your chicken and your vegetables, that dumpling is absorbing some of that liquid and then basically puffing up. So you get this nice, without having to poach it in water, you're kind of poaching it in a steaming method. So, and it's also fun. It's a little bit different. It's fun for me to make. It's not something that I make every day, but the empapillote method could be used for many different things. You could steam fish in there with some tomatoes, capers, olives, a little bit of fennel fran, and kind of turn it into more of a Provençal style fish dish. But here we're just going to do a basic chicken, vegetables, greens dumpling. So the first thing that we need to do is actually do the greens dumpling. So this is a beautiful piece of crusty whole wheat sourdough bread from Sparrow Bush Bakery out here in the Hudson Valley. It's one of my favorites. But it can really be any French bread. It doesn't have to be whole wheat, but it has to be something that has a little bit of chew to it. You don't want to use the ends of Dave's bread or Arnold because that'll kind of create a bit of a mealy texture in your dumpling. So you're going to want to stick with something that's got a little bit of gluten development, which you'll find in sourdough type breads. So first thing that we want to do, cut off kind of the hard, crusty end. That's the only thing that we're not going to use on this, besides the very bottom of the crust. The very bottom of the crust makes direct contact with the oven or whatever vessel it's cooking in. This is still good for breadcrumbs. You can dry this out in your oven, put it into a coffee grinder or a blender and blend it up, toss it with some chicken and make shake and bake. Do that a lot too. So we've got the hardest parts of the crust, but I still have, this is a sesame bread, so I still have the crust on the outside, which you don't need to take off if you're doing a bread dumpling. It just creates a little bit more of a denser, chewier bread dumpling, which I personally like. And we're just going to cut it up into kind of a small dice. Bit of a wobbly table, so pardon me. We're going for something about 1/4 inch, but if it's a little bit bigger, it's fine, because ultimately we're going to, when we mix it, we're really going to like really mix it, because you want all of the things that are in the bread dumpling to start to kind of emulsify together. So
That's a bustle there, Danny. That table seems a little shaky.
yes, it's a little shaky, but luckily the knife's sharp. So I think in the recipe, I said about 2.5 cups. If it's a little bit more, I think that's fine. I'd say 2.5 to 3 cups is ideal. Anything less, and you might have an overly wet dumpling. Anything more, and you might have an overly dry dumpling.
By the way, Shanika kindly put the recipe in the chat, so everybody's got that.
Yeah. Oh, I think I'm definitely going to use all of this here. And you do want to try and keep it as best you can, at least on the crusty parts. Smaller is a little bit better than bigger, just because they're very chewy. So, got the bread like that. And put it in the bowl. So one thing to think about when you're making a bread dumpling, especially this type of bread dumpling, is you have to introduce moisture to it. Otherwise, you'll have a very dry and chalky dumpling. You know, a lot of the moisture is going to be absorbed through the process of steaming, roast steaming, but you're going to want to add something in. So another thing that I always have is leftover pickle brine. I'm sure everyone has leftover pickle brine. This is a mix of butter pickle and sour pickle. So got a little bit of vinegar, salt for the sour, and then a little bit more of a sweet kind of coriander, turmeric thing going on with the bread and butter. So we're going to put in 3 tablespoons. Another thing that is going to provide the greens component for the dumpling, and also moisture, is going to be spinach. So this is just regular baby spinach that you would get at the supermarket. We got this at ShopRite. I eat a lot of baby greens because they're convenient. You can kind of just throw them in a bowl, make a salad, but you don't always go through them, and sometimes they start to wilt. So kind of a good way to use them if you don't want to use a salad is cook them, or in this case, put them in a dumpling. Also, once we get everything in the bowl, you'll see I'm really going to mix it hard, because we'll eventually kind of start to crush the spinach a little bit, and we'll start to get a little bit of that chlorophyll color in there. So your dumpling itself will pick up more of a greenish hue, which is kind of what you're going for. Also, always have parsley kicking around. And if it's good parsley, you know, ideally organic, just because, you know, no matter how much you wash, sometimes your pesticides are still within the vegetable itself. In this case, parsley carries a lot of the pesticides in its stems. Same thing with kale. So It's hard to always buy organic. Try to buy organic when you can, but you know, I buy organic when we can, but also we go regular too. It just really depends. Try to go organic with kale, cruciferous vegetables, herbs if you can. They'll just be a little bit lower on the pesticide. So I'm also not going to strip this parsley. I'm going to do stem in there and all. You could put in dill. You could put in marjoram. You could put in basil. You could put in dried basil. You could put in dried dill. Really, you could put in anything that you want. You could put curry in there. But I think it's nice to have something in the bread dumpling that has a spice quality to it or an herbaceous quality. So just going to run our knife through the greens a little bit because we're actually trying to crush it a little bit right in the bowl. And now we're going to talk about our binders. So we've got 3 binders in this recipe. We've got bread, we've got eggs, and then we've got cheese in the form of grana. The nice thing about the eggs is they provide moisture, but as you cook them, they basically expand and they really absorb liquid as well. So they'll give your dumpling a little bit more of kind of a delicate spongy texture, where if you didn't have the egg in there, it might be a little bit more dense. I'm gonna go 2 eggs. Take out the shell. Cracked pepper if you like it. I'm gonna put a little bit in there. Pinch of salt. Maybe a little bit more salt. And then we're gonna go with some cheese. So you can really kind of actually use any cheese you want here. You can use a hard cheese. I prefer semi-hard, so things like not 2H, Parmesan, pecorinos are good, but something that's got a little bit of softness to it is a little bit more ideal because it'll kind of blend into your dumpling better. You could use cheddar if you wanted as well. So what we've got going on is you've got your bread, which is going to basically provide the entire support of the dumpling. You've got your spinach, you've got your eggs, you've got your pickle brine to provide moisture. And then you've also got your cheese and your eggs to provide structure so that as this dumpling comes together, it seems a little bit loose in the beginning, but as it comes together, it firms up. And then really, really mash it. Because you're actually looking to turn the color into a homogeneous green. I've done this with kale. I've done this with arugula. I've even done it with red oak leaf lettuce that was on the outside. So really anything that's kicking around that's a green that you don't want to throw in the garbage that is still edible and delicious, throw it in. Okay. So the reason that we're doing this first is after we mix everything together, we're going to let it sit, and then slowly all of those wet things that are in there will start to seep into the bread and it'll get a little bit tighter. One thing to note as well, adding salt into your food, in this case the spinach and specifically the spinach, the salt draws moisture out, so it'll help pull the moisture out a little bit faster. It's a trick of the trade. If you're cooking something and you need to slow it down, you can hit it with a little bit of salt, pull out some of the moisture, and that'll naturally help slow some things down. So, see it.
Hey, Dan, is the egg already in there?
It is, yeah.
How many eggs do you use?
2
2.
eggs.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah. And you could put 3 in if you wanted. 3, it's going to be a little bit more of a cakey texture. I'm kind of going for a slightly cakey, but a little bit firm. I think it eats well a little bit firm because everything in this dish is going to have a little bit of a softer texture. So, dumpling. We'll set that off to the side. Wash the hands.
That's harder than it looks.
Okay. So that is part one. Now that's sitting. We're going to now cut the vegetables, cut the chicken, and then build everything. So I think I said in the beginning what we're using. We're using leeks, carrots, big old purple top turnip, fennel bulb, and then this is red boar kale or red Russian kale. So talk a little bit about peeling and also cleaning of vegetables. The way that I've learned to peel is a little bit different than I'm sure than a lot of people, because I have had thousands and thousands of hours of peeling things. But I really love these peelers. This is made by Recon. I've been using these types of peelers for years. These are this type of peeler. I think a lot of people are used to kind of this type of peeler. And these types of peelers work good in professional environments because you have to peel fast. You have a lot of things to do. You got to peel a case of carrots. You need to go fast. The way I do it is basically tuck my fingers behind, and then as I'm peeling, I'm rotating the carrot. I have confidence that I'm not going to peel off my fingertips because I've done it a lot. But it actually, when you get the hang of it, it's a very fast and even way. You get long strips instead of kind of the jagged edges. Then you got to flip it around and do that. So. Because, you know, you're working a station and you've got all this prep to do and you're taking forever to peel your stuff. You're already kind of done before you even really started. So peeling skills are actually kind of very important. So that's the carrot. Purple top turnip, same idea. Really, you can do it all the way around in a long peel, which I learned from my idol, Jacques Pepin, when I was a kid. But I'm just gonna do same as the carrot. The nice thing about purple top turnip is it's not a super, super dense woody turnip. They have a higher moisture content, so they're good to use in this dish because we need the moisture. You know, hopefully the ultimate result is when you cut open this pouch, you have just the right amount of liquid. So it forms a kind of nice little sauce, hit a little bit of lemon and olive oil, perfect. Okay, next is leeks. One thing to know about leeks are their growing environments are usually very sandy, kind of dirty environments, and they come up from the ground and they capture a lot of their dirt. And that's why you see a lot of the dirt at the top. I use the tops for the packages that are in the oven, but to clean it, basically you go through, find all the tenderish looking green parts, trim it, and then you just take a knife and you split it right down the middle, and then run it under lukewarm water. I know, you know, people say do everything under cold water, but cold water has a little bit more trouble dislodging dirt. And since we're going to cook it right away, I'm not worried about, you know, devaluing the nutritional components of this leek. It's just helping get the dirt out. So same thing on that one. And then fennel bulb. One of my favorites. I love fennel. It also is a kind of a wet vegetable. Sometimes the outside is a little bit woody, so I'm actually going to peel this off, or a little bit stringy. kind of similar to celery fiber. So I like to peel the outside. You could just take off the outside and compost it or use it for something else. But for this purpose, we're going to peel it. And then our kale. One thing that I always try to use the stem if you can. You can always do the taste it. If it's super funky, if it's really stringy or bolted, you can strip the leaf off. But this particular kale has a very nice tender stem, so we're going to put that in as well. This has already been washed so that we can have the magic of television move this along. Doesn't have to be perfect, but the reason I'm taking the stem off and then we'll put the leaf on top of the chicken is you do want to cut the stem a little bit, because the fiber, like a celery fiber, runs the entire length of your kale. So you want to shorten that fiber. Think of it as a piece of, like if you're slicing a piece of flank steak and you see that muscle fiber running down the length of the flank steak, you cut against the grain. Same principle applies for your vegetables, because even vegetables have a cellulose grain too. So you're trying to, especially in tougher vegetables, if you want to shorten the cooking time, find out which way the fiber goes and then cut against it. Okay. Put this off to the side. Okay. Go ahead and clean up our area just a little bit. Okay, we'll start by cutting our stems. I'm going for something that, I don't know, is about 1/8 to 1/4 inch, so that we're ensuring it's going to be super tender in the cooking process, and also we won't run into any issues with fiber. So that goes in the bowl. Carrots. I'm going to show you a roll cut. Now, a roll cut is a classic knife cut from French cuisine. It's not derivative. Actually, is very useful. It basically creates a multifaceted cut that it doesn't roll around as much. So the secret to a knife cut on something that's round, it has to be round. You basically, on the bias, like if you're cutting celery on the bias, if you're cutting scallion on the bias, any type of cut on the bias, start your first cut at the end, and then you're turning the carrot towards you 90 degrees. So your cut side is facing up, and then you make the exact same bias cut right through the center at an angle of that first cut of the carrot. Then you roll it back, roll it back, roll it back, roll it back, roll it back. So this also allows you to, even if you're moving down to the end, by rolling the cut, you can kind of change where you're making your cut of the carrot to kind of keep the very tip versus the fat end about the same size. Because, you know, if you cut a coin down that way, if you want it all to cook at the same time, you should cut this a little bit thicker and then cut that a little bit thinner. But in this method, you can kind of adjust your cut by being a little bit more shallow or a little bit deeper so that everything's about the same size. Obviously, this doesn't have to be perfect at all. It's being cooked in aluminum foil in papillote style, but that is basically, you've got 1, 2, 3 flat sides, and you've got your rounded end. So this is something that glazes well. You can get color on it if you're roasting it. And then leeks, I'm just cutting those into about 1/2 inch pieces. And then a note about the core. Sometimes the cores of leeks can be a little bit woody, so you just take a look at it. You know, I like to split it in half. If my knife hits any resistance, or if it looks like it's kind of dense and woody, you can toss it, but this core is very nice. So we're going to put that in there as well. I don't need all this leek, so a little bit more. Okay. Next is our fennel. So another note about fennel, often fennel comes with its stems intact. It's actually one of my favorite dishes. I did it this restaurant called Franny's years ago, which was a conserva utilizing the tonnage of fennel stems that we accrued in that restaurant and using it for something so we didn't throw it away. So it was something that was cooked in olive oil, and it had olives and garlic confit and fennel seed and fennel pollen and strago liqueur, and it was delicious. We put it on fish, but in this case, same type of thing goes. You taste it. If it's tender, put it in. And then you've got your fennel bulb. In this case, you can dice it up, or you can try to cut it into wedges. The key here is just maintaining your core, because your core, just like an onion or like any other vegetable that grows in the ground, that core will keep it intact, keep the layers of that fennel intact.
Hey, Danny, what's the best substitute for fennel? Because I don't like fennel. Like in general, like I made a dish the other day and I used celery and I feel like it probably didn't do the trick.
Well, do you like fennel seed?
No. I don't like licoricey.
Okay. Celery is actually not a bad substitution. So, you know, this is eventually what we're going to be getting.
Oh, wow.
I just needed to make sure that these were ready so that when we finish the dish, we can jump right into unveiling those. Sorry to kill the secret. All right. Next is our turnip. It's a big turnip, but I'm looking for about an inch cube because this is kind of soft. If you cut it too small, your turnip can get kind of mushy. So okay. So you've got all your veg in the bowl. A little bit of olive oil. Say about 2 tablespoons. Generous pinch of salt, maybe 2. Again, the salt its intent is to obviously season your dish, but it is also starts the maceration process on your vegetables so that once it starts cooking, that liquid's already coming out. So it'll prevent scorching in your chicken. And then basically stir it up and let it macerate. Macerate is really anything that is sitting under some sort of seasoning. It doesn't necessarily have to be salt. It could be sugar. It could be sitting in lemon juice. It's anything that is pulling out the liquid or using liquid to marinate something, so to speak. Okay. Okay, there's our vegetables right there. All right, last thing is chicken. We'll do a quick note on chicken. Chicken, very healthy. Chicken skin, delicious, but you don't want to eat too much chicken skin because it will affect your cholesterol levels. It's good, but in this case, I like having the boneless, skinless so that we can add in olive oil. There is a little bit of fat that usually always comes with your chicken. This is about 2 pounds, about 6 pieces total, which is perfect because we're going to be cutting them in half. So 6 pieces will give us 4 orders, with each person getting 3. Okay, just going to cut that right in the middle. Your chicken thigh, usually when you get it like this, it's got kind of a fat end, and then it's got where the bone, thigh bone is, and then you've got another little fat end. I try to bisect it on the chunkier side right at the edge. Gives you about 2 even pieces that would cook theoretically in about the same amount of time. Definitely make sure to wash your hands. I think that's a given. I think everyone knows to wash your hands when you're working with chicken. This happens to be not organic chicken, but it is no hormone, antibiotic free. It's hard sometimes to even afford organic chicken because it's so expensive, almost prohibitively expensive. Again, try as best you can. Maybe try to avoid Tyson or Purdue chicken. But, you know, if you're eating Tyson chicken 3 times a day, you might have a problem, but we're not really talking about that here. No offense to Tyson Foods, but we'll try to stay away from mass market chicken. Okay, so again, seasoning your chicken, it's really whatever you like. I'm doing pepper, a little bit of olive oil, about a tablespoon. Again, 2 nice pinches of salt. And then I'm using herbs de Provence because I had it in the cabinet. Herbs de Provence is a French blend that has rosemary, tarragon, lavender, thyme, sometimes oregano. I love it. It's very floral. I think it works really well with chicken and also works really well with vegetables. So actually, we're going to do about a teaspoon. Teaspoon of dried herb is a lot of dried herb. That would be the equivalent of a cup of fresh herbs, probably, maybe even a little bit more. When they're dried, they really shrink. And then just stir that up. So far, nothing has gone on the stove. We haven't had to heat anything up other than your oven. All of this is just your prep or your mise en place or whatever you would call it. You're just getting everything ready because once you start making your foil packets, you want to have everything ready to go. So we've got chicken, vegetables, greens dumpling, and then our clean greens. Now's the fun part. I think the foil fell on the ground. Now we assemble. So one thing to talk about when using aluminum foil for this, it's amazing, but the only caveat is you have to be careful when you're sealing them. If you get a little bit of a crack or you tear it because you've been going too fast, it'll basically won't puff up for you. So I always get heavy duty foil. I think this is a 18-inch. Heavy duty 18-inch foil is what we're going for. We're gonna tear, I'm just gonna do 2 for you. We're gonna tear, I would say, an 18 by 24-inch piece so that we have enough foil to properly seal these packets. So, like that. I've also always been of the school. Oops. Got a foil tear. I've been of the school of the 2 sides of the foil. Some people don't even ever pay attention to it. Some people think that, you know, you always cook shiny side, you always cook dull side. I was always a shiny side person myself, but I just found out that it doesn't matter. It's just the milling process of the aluminum. and the shiny side goes through makes contact with the roller. So that's actually something I didn't know until I was doing research for this. Another annoying thing is when things break on you. We'll save this for something else. There we go. Everything can be cut slightly different sizes. You know, the foil has to be the one thing that you got to keep an eye on, because it would be too bad to do this work and then put it in the oven and then have it not really inflate for you, or even worse, not have it on a sheet tray and then have the liquid bleed out in the oven and cause a smoky mess. So got our 2 foils. I'm gonna put them lengthwise in front of me. I'm gonna start with a little bit of oil. And I'm gonna basically be building everything, not directly in the center, but maybe the lower third of the foil, so that when we fold over the aluminum foil, it'll meet the other side and everything should be right in the center. So for this one, I'm gonna start with a piece of fennel, vegetables. While I'm doing this, a quick story. The only sleepaway camp experience I ever had in my life was in 4th grade. And one of my favorite food memories is one night we did an overnight camping thing by a creek. And the counselor started the morning by digging a hole, building a fire. And then we made these things called hobo stews, which is kind of maybe not the best term for it, but they're basically foil packs with stew meat, raw stew meat, vegetables. We basically made them into foil packs, and then we put them in the sand and then buried the sand on top and then put the coals on top, went canoeing and fishing and came back, took them out and then ate them. It like literally blew my 4th grade mind, but it was incredible. So I would say I have about a little bit more, 1.5 cups of veg, 2 cups, which I think is totally fine. And then chicken, these are all in half, so we're gonna find 3 pieces. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Next is our greens dumpling. You know what? Let me do our kale first. This is the fun part. You're basically just gonna tear your kale into pieces and you're gonna drape it over the top of the chicken. The function of this is to also trap steam. Will also prevent the chicken from potentially sticking to your foil. Same idea as if you're putting a banana leaf on something. We're using the kale for its moisture, its flavor, but also as a cover for our chicken. Okay, one more piece there. A little bit of salt. Just a little bit for the kale. Obviously, if you're salt adverse, you can season as little as you want. It does need a little bit of salt in your vegetable. If you're no salt at all, then I would say maybe add a tablespoon, 2 tablespoons of water into your pack. Okay, let's do that up just a little bit. Okay, so we have this beautiful pack. We've got our bread dumpling, definitely firmed up. Gonna get your hands in here on this one. And it may seem kind of loose, may seem like, oh, it's gonna break, but it will not break. It'll actually kind of gel together and then really puff up. And I am gonna put just a tiny bit of oil on that too. You know, the oil I put on the kale, the oil put on the dumpling is 1/4 teaspoon, maybe 1/2 teaspoon. Okay. Now for the folding. So working away from you, pulling towards you. Bring the foil over. And also want to mention, the reason I put the olive oil on the foil in the beginning is really specifically for the dumpling. It's the one thing that sticks a little bit. You'll kind of have to, take it off the foil. The oil will help that. You could also spray your foil before you go out too, but stay away from nonstick foil. I would stay away from any nonstick foil that's going to be, getting a lot of heat. I don't think I want to put nonstick film in my diet. So distracting. So we've got our pack. We've got the back away from us. Checking underneath, everything's tucked in nicely right there. Okay. So I'm going to spin it around so you can see it. Okay. Again, this could be a piece of fish, some chopped tomatoes, capers, a little piece of fennel, some sliced olives, a little olive oil, sprig of rosemary, and then you could bake that for 30 minutes versus 50 minutes or something along those lines. But again, the foil procedure is the same. It's combination heat. We call it dry heat on the outside, which is producing your moist heat cooking environment on the inside. Okay. And then if you've ever made stuffed pasta, it's kind of the same thing. You basically square off by tucking in the edges. We're going to do that with the foil. And I'm going to start by pulling the widest part and folding it over twice. Big folds. Then we're going to go to a side, try to pull it even. Then you're going to do another 2 folds. Spin it around. Do another 2 folds. And then with each fold, I'm really flattening out the foil. So that crease, basically, as we're folding it over, is locking in all of that steam. Okay, now we've done 2, 2, 2. Now we're going to go back over, do another fold in the front, pressing it down, keeping an eye on the back, pulling it as needed. 1 more fold here, 1 more fold here, and then 1 more fold in the front. Okay. Now, if you've done it right, you've also trapped air in there, and that's kind of what you want. It's almost like a little Pop-Tarty looking thing. You would just take a regular cookie sheet, preferably something that has edges. So if you do get a tear, your liquid isn't going to kind of spill off into your oven. I'm not actually going to bake it on this, but I just want to get it onto this cookie sheet. So you've got your little, this could be 1 serving for someone like myself. Could be 2 servings for, maybe people that don't quite eat as much. It's about a little bit more, about a ½ pound of chicken per person. So it's not a ton. All right. Would anyone like me to do another foil packet? Or does anyone have any questions before I kind of start to show you the finished product?
Love to see the finished product.
Okay, let's
Danny,
do the
I have a
finished product.
question.
Sure.
Could you just, I wanted to write down the number of times. It's 2 times on the bottom.
Yep, 2 times on the
each
bottom.
side, then go 1 time again in the front, and then 1 time again on each side.
Yep.
And then 1 time in the front again.
Yeah, so I'm going for at least 4 folds for each side.
Okay.
And then maybe a 5th fold in the front.
Okay.
That way, you're kind of compressing the environment so that you can maximize the amount of steam rising that you get from your foil. But also, if you have all of this kind of empty space around your food, those become your scorch spots. So that's, that heat is going to go directly to that spot. So things that are kind of on the outside will cook a little bit faster. So we want to kind of tighten up that cooking environment by getting the foil folds as close to the food as possible.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's a question.
What did you preheat the oven to, and how long are you cooking it for?
So it's 375.
Okay.
If you have an oven that has convection conventional is just regular ovens, that's no fan. And then convection is a fan moving the hot air. You want conventional. You don't want to move a lot of hot air around. It'll actually cook it a little too fast. So 375, and I do 50 minutes.
And if we just don't happen to have a protein around, like anything we recommend on the vegetarian side of things to kind of like.
Oh, just basically, if it's all vegetables with no protein, I would just say double up your veg. You know, you could still have your dumpling, you could still have your veg, you could throw another vegetable in there. You could do 2 pieces of Fennel Bulb with extra vegetables in there. The chicken isn't really the most important part. It's kind of a supporting player in this.
Cool.
So you could easily pull out the chicken. You know, if you're lacto-ovo, then the dumpling would be fine. But if you're vegan, the dumpling might not work. So definitely would be very delicious vegetarian as well.
Cool. Someone had asked what would be the adjusting cooking time if it was fish instead of chicken.
I would say depending on the kind of fish that you're cooking, if you're cooking like a fatty piece of halibut from Whole Foods, I would say 30 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes. In this case, you have to take a look at your vegetables. You know, the chicken is going to be the longest cooking component of this dish. The vegetables, in my mind, are going to finish a little bit before the chicken. So I can cut them nice and big and know that they'll be tender by the time the chicken's done. If you're working with fish and your cooking time is a little bit shorter, just cut your veg smaller. Super simple. Or choose a vegetable that is higher water content, like fennel, like purple top turnips, celery, onions, greens, those types of things. So I would just, you know, take a look at how thick your fish is. If it's bone in, 30 minutes. If it's boneless, 20 to 25, and cut your veg just a little bit smaller. That way you ensure that everything cooks at the same time.
Could you use that dumpling recipe as like dropping it in water, or is it just best as like a baked thing in this situation?
If I had to guess, I would think that you could probably drop these in the water. I might want to add in 1 more egg just to make it a little bit more of a binder, because we're not going to have the gentle steaming heat of a Impapillo cooking method. If you're dropping it into water, you're going to have agitation. There's a chance that your dumpling can kind of break. So I would just maybe add 1 more egg and then go a little bit smaller. So you could probably even form them into little balls, have your soup, bring up your soup, form all your balls, and then just drop them in, put a lid on it, and then reduce your heat. That way they set. When we say set, that means that they've set their texture, and then they shouldn't break down if you're not agitating. If you're constantly stirring your soup, you'll probably break them up, but I think you could definitely drop these in. Just 1 more egg.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Are we gonna have the reveal now?
Let's do it. All right. So, came out great. They've been sitting in the oven for the last 10 minutes. When they had just come out, they were like really, really puffy. But that steam hasn't gone anywhere. I've made this twice. That's why we have so much. So, now, my favorite part. So I would just position it if you've got a plate that has a kind of a little bit of a lip to it, I think that would be ideal because there should be liquid in here. I'm going to make a little bit of a slit. Sorry, tomorrow. And then really, I'm just dislodging the dumpling. Came out really nice. I'm gonna put that on the plate. And then everything else you can kind of just dump on there. And kind of rearrange it a little bit. Move your kale around like that. Everything smells delicious. Everything is tender. I can see the fennel's tender. The carrot's definitely tender. The chicken is definitely tender. So that is the plate. And you can see there's just a little bit of juice in there. That's what we call the sauce. And then I'm going to finish it with a little bit more olive oil because I love olive oil. A little bit of pepper because Lewin's not eating this one. And then my go-to with pretty much everything is citrus, acid, in this case, lemon. And this is a good time to eat lemons because they're in season. Voila. So it's super delicious. It's actually very easy. This is something that you can make, if you're at home by yourself and you're in a situation where it would seem like you're throwing food away. You can make 4 packets. You could freeze 2 of them as long as you have enough freezer space to kind of freeze them flat. You could save one for the next day, throw that in the oven. They're pretty versatile. They could, this could sit around in your fridge for 2 days, be cooked, and still be delicious. So, and the nice thing is, we have to clean 3 bowls, 2 spoons, and then rinse out your foil if you do that for your recycling, and that's it. Your tray should be clean as long as you sealed it well. And it's nice to kind of not have to do a bunch of dishes after making dinner. So,
Danny, can you add hot sauces or ketchup or what, or like what to eat it finally, or probably not?
No, of course. I think ketchup, hot sauce. If you love it, put it on everything. The nice thing about this dish is it's kind of a blank canvas. You can really do lots of things to it. You could up the spice. You could add chilies into it. You could not use herbe de Provence, and you could use like a nice garam masala. You really can kind of do anything. So if you like hot sauce, put hot sauce on there. Maybe take out the lemon. If you like ketchup, ketchup's great too. I wouldn't ever tell someone not to put that on there.
So says a well-renowned chef.
Maybe back in the younger days when you're kind of a little bit more full of yourself, and you want everyone to eat your cuisine. But ultimately, I think the whole idea of this is, it's nutritious, it's delicious, it's something a little bit different to cook and eat. So, put whatever you like on there. I've eaten it with sauerkraut. It would be good with kimchi on there. So yeah.
Well, I have to say, I tried it. It was absolutely delicious. So.
I'm very glad.
Yeah, I also got to try it, but I had a different opening technique. I just went right in the middle with the knife. It was kind of fun because then the steam came out.
Yeah.
I got a little facial while I did it.
Yeah, we didn't quite get the dramatic steam because it didn't come right out of the oven onto the plate. But yeah, there's a lot of steam that gets trapped in these packets. So just make sure that if you are taking it right out of the oven, just don't put your hand over your steam vent because you'll definitely burn yourself.
This is
Thank
awesome.
you, Danny.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Danny,
Yeah.
very much.
Thank you so much, Danny.
Thank you.
And
Yes,
everyone
You're
for
welcome.
joining us tonight. Now I'm like, must go cook. I really, and knowing firsthand that it's actually like a really delicious meal. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for that.
You're
Earlier
welcome.
in the chat, I think some of you have gotten the email, depending on when you registered this morning with the recipe. But I also posted it in the chat. And we also have a feedback form. So if you feel so inclined, it's in our chat, and we'd love to hear what y'all thought about Danny. This is part of the reality show aspect we're doing. We're deciding if, no, I'm kidding. No, we just want to know what, you know, that would be really
Hopefully, I
funny
make
if,
the
like,
cut.
yeah, like we're like, you.
I liked it, Danny.
The ratings
Oh, thanks,
didn't do
Mom.
well. That would be hilarious. No, we just want to hear what, you know, the community have to say about the programs, because we're just starting out, and, you know, it's a new landscape virtual, and we want to make sure that, you know, we can continue to learn and grow, and we're, you know, providing what people are interested in. But
Totally.
really, thank you so much, Danny, for doing
You're welcome.
this.
And I want to add on one thing to that, Shanika. If you have time to fill out the feedback form, let me know if we are going to do something else. What would be something that you would like to see cooked, something that you think is important to show other people. I can kind of cook anything for the most part. And I'm always looking for inspiration from other people about, you know, what we could be kind of cooking together. So
Sounds like there's a penchant for roast chicken here.
Yeah.
well, roast chicken is, I mean,
So
that's the
good.
beauty of roast chicken. You can cook it 50 different ways.
Yeah.
Can I ask one last question?
Sure.
If I were to prepare a few of these packets in advance, you said to just like put them in the freezer. When I'm ready to actually cook them, do I need to let them thaw first when I take them out of the freezer, or can I go straight from the freezer to the oven?
I would pull them out the night before.
Okay.
And just one thing I will say, they freeze really well. If you're going to freeze it, put it on something flat, and let it freeze that way, just so that you don't, by the movement of the foil, you don't get a little micro tear. But yeah, pull it out the night before. Maybe pull it out 10-15 minutes before you're going to cook it the next day, and then just pop it right in the oven. The thing going against you if you're cooking it from frozen is it's going to take that much longer to thaw in the cooking process. And when you've got heat kind of bombarding frozen food, you actually run the risk of kind of drying out. Your dumpling would probably have a really darker crust, because it's still in the frozen state and it's not releasing its liquid quite yet. And it, even a matter of 5 minutes that it takes to go from frozen to thawed and then cooking is enough to kind of create scorching. So
Got it.
that's why I would temper it
Sounds
and
good.
defrost it.
Cool. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right. So thanks again, Danny. We'll be doing
Thanks,
another
everyone.